I do sometimes lose control.
That's very patronizing.
I am being patronizing. Shut the up.
What makes you comfortable in what I perceive as a hostile environment?
You shouldn't be on this panel. That being said, Piers,
I'm just very brain broken. I like it.
How should politicians engage?
It is really Hollywood for ugly people.
Why are you the last Twitch contract?
There's nothing that you can compare it to. I'm so goddamn lived up today, dude. Shh, don't say that.
Should the news be entertainment?
I don't have any empathy for professional commentators.
Are you not a professional commentator? Today on the Colin and Samir Show, we're joined by Hasan Piker. Hasan is one of the most prominent live streamers on Twitch, but instead of live streaming himself gaming, he live streams himself for 8 hours a day, reacting to news and global politics.
What the was that?
He has over 2.6 million followers on Twitch and 51,000 monthly paying subscribers, which at $5 a month means he's bringing in well over $3 million a year in subscription revenue alone. Hasan represents the modernization of political coverage, and we're even seeing US politicians like AOC join his streams. With this being an election year here in the US, we wanted to bring Hasan on to talk about the role of creators in politics. Whether or not you agree with his political views, this is an important discussion on news and information. Where do we get it from? Should it be entertainment? And what is the modern business of news? Now, make sure you subscribe here on YouTube for more conversations with creators. And without further ado, here's our conversation with Hasan Piker. Hasan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
What does your day look like today? Because I know like right after this, you're rolling straight into streaming. Right?
Well, even before this, my day started at 6 a.m. Usually I wake up at 6 a.m. I read a lot, try to get a good assessment of what is going on in the world as soon as I wake up. And that's what I did. But this time I was like, oh, I have a podcast at 9. And so I was like, I have to take my dog to the dog park. I have a puppy. She's like a year and change. She's like a year and I think 3 months old. So she has a lot of energy in the mornings. So I take her to the dog park, and then I also do cardio. This is my cardio day. So I play basketball.
You played basketball this morning?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I woke up at 6. I went to the park. I ran with my dog. And after this, I'm gonna go back home, taking some calls along the way, and also listening to NPR, and again trying to figure out what's going on in the world. And then I'm gonna start streaming as soon as this is done. And usually at 11 a.m. Pacific time is when I start streaming, and I don't stop streaming until like 8 p.m. Pacific time, and that is 7 days a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does it matter? Like we were concerned that when you were coming over here, we were running out of time because we saw that it said your stream starts at 11. It doesn't really matter. Like you can just push that. I would think for something like streaming specifically about the news, that it's appointment viewing, that it like really matters that 11 you're there.
I think habitual viewership is really important, especially because like I've noticed that my audience is gotten older with me, and also just older in general. A lot of streamers don't really have a super consistent schedule other than like some of the older streamers that have been doing this for many, many years. For the most part, either you're an XQC type, and I would say I'm similar to him in that regard, where you just stream all the time. You're just live all the time, literally every day for hours on end. Or you are inconsistent. You're relatively inconsistent. You stream because you feel like it. You stream because some days you wake up late and you start stream whenever you feel like it. Some days you don't stream at all. And it's fine. I think that there's there's pros and cons to both types of streaming. But for me, I think habitual viewership is important because it's the news. But having said that, of course, it's still not like I'm not Jake Tapper. You know what I mean? So I don't have to literally be there at 11 a.m. Pacific every single day. I try to, and I usually do, give or take. But sometimes I'm an hour late. Sometimes I'm 2 hours late, if I have other stuff going on that I think is very important, like this podcast.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
How do you segment out, or do you segment out your streams? Like going live for that amount of time, in a week or in a day, like later today, do you have segments to your stream? Do you pre-write them? Is that what's happening at 6 a.m. when you wake up?
So everything's up here. Okay. It's probably not the best way to do it. Sometimes I do write it down just so I have a better, just if there's like certain things I have to get to. In the beginning, I think I used to write it a lot more, like the outline and bullet points of what I wanted to talk about. Now I just freestyle it. It's been years and years and thousands of hours of doing it, so I can just kind of go off the cuff. But yeah, I set up like a skeleton outline of what top news stories I want to get to. I, at this point, have the capacity to look at something and draw back from, this almost decade of professional political commentary that I've done to be like, here are the stats that correspond to this information that I'm delivering. Here is why it's wrong. Here's what you need to do to fix it. Here's a comparable scenario from a different country.
And that's how you arrive at Le Pen. All she had to do was basically go, yeah, my bad that my dad was a Nazi. I am no longer as much of a Nazi.
So I just kind of do that off the top of my mind at this point.
And how do you go about, or do you feel like a responsibility to fact checking or research, or like, what is that recipe for you? And then I've heard you in the past refer to yourself as an entertainer.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself an entertainer? Do you consider yourself a journalist? Do you consider, like, what do you consider yourself?
I consider myself an entertainer, I would say. I am an entertainer first and foremost. I obviously have a political perspective, and I'm very honest about that perspective. I'm honest about my biases, and I feel like a lot of people are dishonest, as a matter of fact, about having biases. Everyone has one. Everyone has self-interest in a certain direction. And I think when people try to act like they are doing objective analysis, or rather, let's say, not objective, but like neutral, when they act like they are remaining neutral, in many circumstances, they omit key details. I would rather tackle it head on. I watch a lot of Fox News, for example, on stream. Obviously, I do not agree with Fox News, but that's apparent. And I'd rather hear what the other side is saying and openly tell you, like, this is my perspective. Here's why they're wrong. So I think that is what I try to do, and I try to do that in an entertaining way. My goal is to educate to the best of my ability, to show people who are interested in being charitable a different alternative perspective that they probably have never been privy to before, especially in America.
What would you say makes a good stream? Because I would assume in that scenario, you're watching Fox News. A better, more enjoyable, more entertaining stream is a moment that is has more energy to it, where you're more passionate, right? You're perhaps like angered at what's being said, right?
Yeah, for sure. Or just like having fun. I think that there's streams are very vibes based in a weird way, where if you're in a good mood and your audience is also kind of in a good mood and they're responding to it, because the way I stream is like it's very chat focused. There's a lot of back and forth, and I want it to be that way. That's why, as long as you follow me for 10 minutes, I don't place any other restrictions on like who can chat. That of course creates a lot of additional problems, but we don't have to get into that right now. But because of that, I think when you're in a good mood and chat's in a good mood and you're just riffing back and forth, they're making jokes, I'm cracking jokes, that I think is like probably the best the best vibe and the most entertaining stream that you can get to. But I call my segments looking at conservative like crazy people hogwatch. So I try to make it as entertaining as possible.
I think like when I was growing up, like Jon Stewart was our version of like alternative comedic entertaining news, right?
Yeah.
Like that was a more fun way to get your news. And I think in a more global perspective, Bassem Youssef was that.
Yeah.
Right? Were those inspirations for you?
Absolutely. I met Bassem many years ago at Politicon, and we kept in touch for a little bit, but he has not reached back out to me recently. So I don't know. Hit me up, Bassem, if you're watching. I'm sure he's a fan. But as far as Jon Stewart goes, yes, he is. I am not ashamed to admit that he is an iconic figure for me. When I was growing up, that was my dream. My dream was to not become a comedian necessarily, because I don't think I'm funny enough, but definitely do like The Daily Show. That's what I wanted to do when I was growing up.
Interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I was in Turkey. I was growing up in Turkey. I was watching The Daily Show going like, damn, like there's people in America who understand what's going on, like kind of, you know? And yeah, he's that format was very it was very important for me, especially because political satire is huge in Turkey. I can't speak on it now, but when I was growing up, because I haven't been back in a very long time, but when I was growing up, we had a multitude of different comics, newspapers that would be released every week, sometimes daily, usually weekly. And it featured a lot of political commentary in it. And it was huge. It was very important in my development growing up in Turkey, where people are, definitely way more, I would say, interested in talking about politics. So, I come from that background. That was something that I always wanted to do in general.
Do you feel like today, like that context of satirical commentary, in like a newspaper or like a cartoon or like something like The Onion, right? Where it's like, okay, we know the context here is satire. Do you feel like when people come across content today on the internet, where maybe it's the first time they're coming across you, do they take things too much at face value? Or is there a risk at taking things as truth, face value, not understanding if it's satire? And how do you put that out there that it's like, at times you're being light, at times you're being satirical, you're obviously being contrarian at times as a point of comedy?
What you're describing is something that is a very real problem.
Yeah.
T-Pain famously thought that I was a right-wing Republican.
Right.
Because I love wearing the MAGA hat, and I have this alter ego named Hank Pecker, who I will use when I'm like doing role play games and stuff like that. But also beyond that, like sometimes I'll just put the voice on and start talking like this and be like, hell yeah, brother, vaccines are making you autistic and gay, like that sort of thing. And then people that see that in that moment, especially because like a lot of people have, a lot of liberals and a lot of conservatives as well, they have, they're way more sensitive about politics than I am, I guess, which is ironic to say. Because I do get very emotional, very passionate, but like I'm not as sensitive in the sense that like putting on a MAGA hat doesn't automatically mean that I am, Republican. But to the outsider, when they see that, they're like, oh, this is not satire. This guy is like a right-wing Republican. So I do think that there's a lot of people who probably see that in that weird moment, because like I'm live for 8 hours a day, but no one's going to sit through that, right? Unless they're already invested. So they see like a 30-second clip, and in a 30-second clip, you can make me out to believe anything, basically, especially because of my dry humor as well. People say my sarcasm is sometimes hard to recognize.
I think what's interesting is that even happened to Stephen Colbert, right? With the Colbert Report.
Yeah.
He has like a 30-minute, like it was so clearly satirical, and the social media landscape wasn't where it's at today, where it was like being clipped as much, and yet people still believed that he was actually like the counterpart to Jon Stewart.
Yeah. Yeah, that was always fascinating to me. I never really understood that. I don't understand how you can look at him and go, that's my guy. Because he was clearly making fun of conservatives.
Right.
Like he was making bad arguments, which is really interesting because I feel like now those bad arguments are good arguments. Conservatives do agree with that now, it seems. So maybe Colbert was responsible for the brain rot that is permeating through American political discourse. I don't know.
I think what's changed now is we're so saturated when it comes to like political content on social feeds. And so someone can see a quick clip of you as a character but who knows what it was next to, right?
Yeah.
And they can take that 15 seconds and believe whatever they want it. They can make it whatever they want it to be.
Yeah.
Right. And that's become really difficult that like, in a way, the medium is like devaluing or at least clouding the message at times.
Oh, for sure.
Right. In a way that it's never done before.
Absolutely. I used to listen to the Joe Rogan Experience like way back in the day. It was an old school Joe Rogan head. I even have his mug. Met him before, hung out with him, as a matter of fact, after his like comedy show, because he used to be a TYT fan, the Young Turks. And back then he would always complain. He was like, I'm doing a 3-hour podcast. Of course, like you can just clip me out of context. Like, and I never fully understood that at the time because I was just starting off in media. And now that I am live 8 hours with a real chat, like a real audience that can respond and can, you know, try to change the dynamic of the stream, right? I now understand it completely. He was right. It's just if you're, it is unimaginable to the outside world that like you're not creating media in this like perfectly manicured environment. It is very real in that regard.
That's a really good point. That I think that, you know, we as a society have probably not caught up to the concept yet that media is now being created by independent individuals and can be broadcast to millions of people without any filters or, you know, big teams or anything like that. And I think that's extremely positive in some regards. And I think it can be dangerous and challenging in other regards. And I guess the question then becomes like, is there a responsibility on the creator, or do you feel a responsibility for that context?
Absolutely. Well, I can only do so much.
Sure.
I don't want to, like, I'm going to have fun no matter what happens. So if I find it, you know, fun to portray a character, which has the capacity to potentially alienate people who don't understand that I'm portraying myself as a character, or if I say something that's like sarcastic, for example, and people don't understand it, and it can get like clipped out of context, I am still not going to stop myself from doing it. That is one aspect. But if you're talking about the responsibility of like delivering, you know, accurate news analysis, then yes, that is something that I do care about. I don't want to mess that up. I think that's like probably the most important thing for me.
And do you think that is shared across the board in the business of news?
To a certain degree, yes. I think no matter who it is, no matter who is doing it, no matter what their perspective is, they want to present the best possible argument.
Right.
That is what is going to put you ahead of other people, right? So even from like a pure business standpoint, self-interest, people want to be a reliable source, a trusted source in news. So I think that people care about it to a certain degree, but then beyond that, I think obviously there's other ambitions. Like for some people, it might mean making money, making as much money as possible, getting as many eyeballs as possible, but in the direction of generating revenue. I want to also get as many eyeballs as possible, but I definitely do care more about communicating this message to as broad an audience as possible that will be charitable to receiving it, and at least will like, you know, second guess themselves before immediately being antagonistic towards it.
Sure.
It's less about revenue and more about that, but you know, some people do care about the revenue aspect of it, and that's fine. I think ultimately maybe some people look to more biased sources deliberately to craft that, to craft one side's arguments. There are many massive content creators, especially on the right, I would say, or people who present themselves as like center right or center content creators that definitely do lean heavily on one side. That's why I say it's important to openly admit your biases, in my opinion, even though people do punish you for it, because that's a very effective way to just like, boom, stop the conversation, be like, you're this. I don't want to have a conversation with you about anything anymore. I will never listen to you. You're this thing. And it doesn't matter if I don't even know what that thing is, because I've decided, and we as a society have collectively decided that you're that thing and that's bad. So we will not hear you out.
Is your objective then to like attempt to find some of the middle ground, some of the in-between? My assumption there with most news is that like that approach does not lead to interesting or good content or good community building.
Yeah,
I
no.
feel like, but it is what is like, well, at least people say is needed and is productive.
I wouldn't say I attempt to find a middle ground. No, I think I'm very polarizing. And because I do have red lines, right? Like I always try to get we're a very leftist community. And as a leftist community, there is definitely a level of hostility to what people would perceive as microaggressions. Anything and everything that could be a genuine, honest, curiosity-based question could be perceived as racially charged. And in many instances it is, because we are all products of our implicit biases. We're all products of our environment, our upbringing, right? And if the systems that we were brought up in are obviously like maybe a little racist, like without even recognizing it, we just develop these attitudes and we never check it. And that creates what you would consider to be a microaggression. And I always maintain this position that like, this is a learning environment. So of course there are going to be people that come in and are going to have some questions that you, if you are from this marginalized background, are going to perceive as like kind of fucked up. Can I curse on this podcast?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Kind of messed up.
Thanks for taking it back.
Thanks for walking back on that.
I took it back.
It felt wrong. He's like looking around. He's like, no, this is not the place.
So when that happens, like I always try to tell my audience of like very progressive people, like you also have some kind of privilege blind side, and there is an intersectionality to that. And that there are going to be certain issues that you're not super knowledgeable on, that you might actually come across as like offensive. We shouldn't shut out people like that from the conversation. But having said that, I do have red lines, in which case if someone is like very obviously trying to abuse that charitability to cynically deploy hateful sentiments and things of that nature that will make that environment a hostile environment, well then, yeah, you're going to get banned.
Man, what makes you comfortable in what I perceive as a hostile environment? Like if I were you for 8 hours a day, I'd be so afraid of saying the wrong thing, of getting clipped, of having people hate me, at least as I'm perceiving it, right? Like how do you sit in what I consider to be a lot of discomfort for 8 hours a day?
I'm just very brain broken. I like it.
You like it?
I think ultimately I find a lot of emotional fulfillment from what I do. When I go outside and, if I go to a restaurant and a waiter comes up and is like, yo, listen, dude, I got to let you know, big fan. You're the reason why, I joined DSA, or you're the reason why I, started community organizing or something like that. Or when I go outside, I see an Amazon delivery driver, things of that nature. Like it's the same stuff. When I see that, when I hear about people in my community that are participating in unionization efforts, when I hear about people in my community that are going to demonstrations, organizing demonstrations, and creating mechanisms of pressure against the many different injustices that we experience on a daily basis, I'm like, that's it. That's why I do it. So it doesn't matter if people are clipping me out of context or saying that I'm a bad person, because I do genuinely believe that as long as someone comes in with an open mind and is charitable and doesn't have all of the baggage that they have seen so far online about like any particular individual, they will understand what it's about very quickly. They will understand that I do not harbor ill will against them, and that I'm simply trying to present them with an alternative and try to explain why they have so much anger and anxiety and animosity and where it stems from. Because a lot of people, I think, have a tendency to individualize their anger and think that it is a byproduct of like someone that has wronged you. Or even when they look at like a societal reason as to why they feel resentment, like incels, for example, they think it's women or they think it's feminism, when the actual systemic reasons as to why they feel anxiety or anguish in many circumstances, I believe, is a byproduct of the current way that we operate. Capitalism.
So you're saying like as hate comes in, you're able to separate it from something that is personal to you, right? That as like there's an onslaught of potential hate, you're like, I can understand that this has to do with something deeper, the way this person was raised, and that allows you to like sit in some of that.
Yes, but I also do have weak moments, many of them, and people
trying to
don't
understand it.
Yeah, no, people definitely don't see, I mean, there's probably compilations out there, me just like yelling at a chat or just like just laying it on them. And that usually happens after like, 4 hours of me having to address the same thing over and over again. And like people cynically coming in and being like, no, just curious. That's like usually the just curious is usually deployed very cynically online. Yeah. I do sometimes lose control, let's say. It happens usually when I tend to come close to burning out. I notice that I have a hair trigger, and I will just like pop off way faster in those moments, in those instances. But beyond that, the reason why I do it, to draw it all back in, the reason why I do it is because I get a lot of emotional fulfillment out of changing people's minds. And I think getting them to participate in politics and in organizing, running for office, things of that nature, that actually is the reason why I do it. And we've been able to do these massive fundraisers as well as a consequence of that. Like I randomly popped up and when I went to Texas, I went to Alvea Sanctuary, my friend Maya's animal sanctuary. And casually, I was like, oh yeah, you want to put up a donation link? We raised, in 2 hours, we raised $30,000, right? And that was totally impromptu, like out of nowhere. And I think that being able to do stuff like that on a whim, it makes everything else worth it.
Where does empathy lie in your mission? Like essentially suggesting that, with being relatively polarizing or self-proclaimed polarizing, is there a role of empathy for the other side when you have a certain amount of biases, someone with the opposite biases as you? Is there a role of empathizing with that side?
Yeah, 100%. I believe that every single person is on a journey, is on their own journey of education, rehabilitation, self-reflection. And I have had different opinions in the past on certain matters that I have grown out of. And I think that it's totally valid, totally normal to have certain things that you look back at in the past that you would consider now to be bigoted, right? It's just a part of human nature. It's something that I genuinely believe. It's something that I believe for the American criminal justice system, which we don't do enough of, rehabilitation. And it's certainly something that I believe for people that have done, I guess, what we would consider internet crimes, like, something that is worthy of cancellation, for example, right? I think that person should always be able to grow, learn, try to offer some kind of restitution to those that they have potentially wronged or harmed, and then inevitably become a better person from that. This is the reason why, yes, empathy is very important for those who don't agree with me, and I do stress that all the time. It probably doesn't make it to the clips, but it is something that is very important for me. And I think it is something that I genuinely think the left as a broader movement needs more of. We do have a tendency to have a lot of purity spirals. And I think that is definitely bad. It's bad for community building, and it's also not reflective of how human beings operate.
Sure.
So
something you just said there is really important. You said it's bad for the clips. And I think that's what I found with the world of the internet opening up political commentary. But I would say even beforehand in news, right? Like,
yeah,
it's just the nature of it. Empathy is not interesting at scale. And that to me, I think is challenging and challenges my questioning of like, should the news be entertainment? Like when I turn on the news or I watch what you're doing or I love Jon Stewart. And I think Bassem Youssef's also fantastic. Like, I think I enjoy watching that way more than I do watching the news.
Yeah.
That's where I get my information. But I question the concept of like, should news be entertainment, or is there a place for like a boring version of the news, which is like, here are the facts, here's what happened.
Yes.
Devoid of opinion. But then it's, again, like you said, that type of stuff doesn't make the clips. It doesn't make the rounds. It's not interesting. And with media being at everyone's fingertips, it's much more interesting to share something on each of the extremes, right? Or each of the poles.
Absolutely. I think that it is incredibly important to definitely still have real journalism happening. Without it, we're screwed. It's also a little bit self-serving for me to say this because like obviously I'm not out there. You know what I mean? I'm not going to a conflict zone and filming stuff or photographing events. So I have to rely on journalists as well to do so. And I have many brilliant, amazing journalist friends who do phenomenal work all around the globe. And I rely on their investigative reporting to be able to do my coverage. Having said that, however, I think what people need to have is media literacy. I think people need to be a little bit more critical about the way that they consume the media and understand that every single media outlet does have certain biases.
What do you think the role is then of someone like you or of a creator who's engaging in some ways in journalism? Is it to be forthright about opinion, about what's opinion, what's being taken as fact? Like,
yeah,
how does the creator, I guess, do it differently?
I mean, I always tell people when I'm speculating, I always tell people when it's like, this is something that I personally believe. I always explain what my biases are and you can pick up on it immediately. Like I'll start, I'll start yapping about it. I can't stop. And the thing,
you are who you are.
Yeah, that is true, I guess. But beyond that, of course, like I'm still operating with like my premises can't be faulty. Like I'm operating with objective facts, as close to objectivity as you can arrive at, and that's where I make my analysis. That's where I drive my analysis from. Is still factually accurate information to the best of our ability.
I do think with on the topic of media literacy, with the increase in content, the opportunity for media literacy, in my opinion, goes down actually, right? Like the vast quantity of headlines that we consume on a daily basis or clips or, long form, whatever we're consuming, as that quantity has gone up, I think whatever your understanding is of the media will be applied across the board. Like to have a nuanced take from clip to clip or headline to headline is extremely challenging and a challenging assumption of society. Yeah.
I think many people don't do that at all, and they don't have that. They just like are fed this information. They
might not even know they should do it. Might not even know that one headline is different from another headline.
Yeah, no, that's why I think that we're arriving at like one of my major goals is I look at the news and I handhold you through it. Where if you are confused about what's going on in the world, my job, the way I see it is like, I'm there to be entertaining first and foremost, but also like basically tell you like, here's what the headline says, but here's what is actually going on. And here's what that headline might mean. And sometimes it's, the headline is accurate or the story is completely, devoid of any sort of errors or omissions of details. Right. But that is what I'm trying to do. That is what I'm trying to do when I look at Fox News. That is what I'm trying to do when I look at MSNBC, because I have plenty of disagreements with liberals as well as I do with Republicans.
I think the interesting parallel between yourself and the New York Times is that, the New York Times, I open the app every single day and I go straight to Wordle and then I play the spelling bee every day.
That's great.
And I'm in there. And then I'll quickly click on the news tab and I'm like, all right, here's some things that are happening and I will spend way less time looking at the headlines and the news, but I'm in. Like you've brought me in, New York Times, you got me, I'm in a news world, right? And I feel like with you, your beginnings were gaming on Twitch. And even still now, there is like you said, you're like having fun, right? Occasionally you do play games.
Yeah.
And then there's a news element as well that like, it's this interesting thing that like the news more so than ever requires this entertainment that may not be a part of it, like with the New York Times, but it's like right there. It's like you need that too to bring people in.
For sure. I think I do it for not the revenue reasons that New York Times does it for, but instead I do it because I think it allows people to see me in a different light and not as like the serious news guy who's yelling all the time.
So on that topic of like, revenue and business, like the business of streaming, the business also of political commentary. I think it's interesting to break down like what does that look like? Because you brought up NPR at the beginning of the conversation, and I actually think what you do is similar to when I grew up. My brother and like we're like young kids, like when we were in the car with my mom or my dad, he wanted to listen to NPR. And I hated it.
It's lame as hell.
Yeah, it's super lame. And I would make fun of him for it, but he always wanted to listen to it. So I was subject to listening to a lot of it.
Your brother would have been a fan of mine if he was like, if it was.
He was, I mean, my brother's like speech and debate, Model UN.
Oh,
went to law
God.
school.
Okay.
And then abandoned all of it. And went into fashion. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. but I grew up like, he introduced me to Jon Stewart, but I grew up listening to NPR in the car. And I think actually what you do being live for that amount of time is more akin to like the radio.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely. I describe what I do to people that are outside of the age range of understanding Twitch as basically Rush Limbaugh, but not evil, if that makes sense.
I said that to Samir.
Colin said that to me yesterday.
Yeah.
So when I listen to Hasan, it has the same rhythm as Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So in that context, like NPR was funded by, like it's public radio, so it's funded by people essentially donating, right?
Yes, I think there's a tax component to it as well. Like there's government grants, and then it's funded by donors and also ad revenue as well. And I think that like creates a conflict of interest in many instances, which they of course immediately will reveal. They'll be like, they'll do a story about Facebook, and then they'll be like, we're also funded by Meta.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's usually how it goes.
So outside of then that type of funding, like for you, that mix is funded by the people, right? So the people who watch you, they're funding you plus ad revenue.
Yes. So the largest chunk of my revenue comes from subscriptions. I think that is the most reliable, most sustainable way of doing this business in general for someone like myself.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be beholden to advertisers, and especially considering the way I do commentary and what I talk about in many instances, there's always going to be so much volatility if I'm hyper focused on ad revenue. But that doesn't mean that I don't have ad revenue. Of course, ad revenue has played even a larger role on Twitch because I think Twitch as a platform directed by Amazon wanted to generate more ad revenue because they saw that was better overall. The splits were better for them, and they had a better way of basically, they had too much inventory and not enough monetization on inventory. So they really made an effort to push for ads. So that is, that's something that I have to do as well, contractually obligated to do as well. And beyond that, there's sponsorships. They can be, multiple year-long sponsorships that are more holistic, like a brand partnership or a one-off. And for me, I spend most of my time, my manager, God bless him, he's great, spends most of his time basically telling people like, we're not going to work with you. But overall, I'll play like a video game every now and then, and that'll be sponsored. And
By the game.
Yeah, by the developers, by the publisher.
Yeah, I mean, because the reality is we're all in the business of being credible to our audiences, right? Like that is the most important thing you can be as a creator. But I think you more so than ever, more than anyone, has to be incredibly credible.
Yes.
With the advertisers you work with, the sponsors you work with,
yes,
how the products that they make are made. You have a different lens on the business of sponsorships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If a company is known for having terrible business practices, like I'm not going to work with them, and that's not necessarily
across the board. Yeah,
I know, but most people don't really care about it. You know what I mean? And they just, or they don't even know about it. The reason for why I do that isn't necessarily because like my audience will respond negatively to it, but it's just like I personally don't want to work with them either. So that's like it's perfect in that regard.
And you're offset by subscriptions. And it's not a nominal amount of subscribers.
It's not. I've been in the top
50,000 subscribers.
Yeah, I've been in the top 5 on the platform for I would say the past 4 years almost now.
Yeah,
like it's never it's stayed around 50, swings up, sometimes swings down, but it's usually around 50,000.
What do you credit that to? Is it a mix of consistency, a mix of like community building?
I think, consistency, community building. People see value in the amount of news coverage that they get. They also don't get to see the ads because I run ads, so it's like an ad-free experience. I run 4 minutes of ads, which is the lowest ad density that I could potentially negotiate for. And it's much lower than many of the other content creators on the platform. But, you know, that can be annoying for people.
Do you have any control over what those ads are or no?
I think I could probably, if I wanted to be like, I don't want this brand to advertise on my stuff, but I don't really care overall. Like if it's running against my content, I don't really care about it that much. Because I don't personally believe that it's gonna end up changing people's minds at all.
Are subscriptions, do they increase sort of like seasonally? Like, do you find that, okay, during election cycles, my subscriptions go up and then there's some attrition, or what does that look like for you?
In general, I think it's just more so tied to viewership. If viewership stays stable, subscriptions stay stable for the most part. If viewership goes down, then subscription numbers go down as well alongside it. But yes, in times of like the election cycle, when my overall live concurrent viewership goes up, of course, the subscription number goes up as well, for sure.
Does going on traditional media outlets do anything for your Twitch audience?
Yeah, it does, actually, but not in the way that you would think. It's not necessarily good for like me reaching out to a broader audience because they watched me on TV or something. It's actually the merger of like a non-traditional media person, myself, going on traditional media actually makes a lot of people in the non-traditional side pay attention to it and watch clips of it. So when I go on Piers Morgan's show, for example, even though ironically he's no longer on TV, I don't think, but regardless, like when I first went on, it was on TV, and it looks like it's TV, right? Like when I do that, people on Twitch are very invested because they're like, oh, that like he's entering like this serious, legitimate environment. So I think
But at times it's like a total circus.
It is. It always is a total circus. It's but I guess like what I'm trying to say is like it gets more people invested on TikTok. Those clips go far and wide on the internet, ironically enough. It's never about the organic viewership that exists for television. It's always about the internet and the internet audiences on all of the other platforms that go, oh, that's an internet guy on TV. I'm going to watch that. I'm going to share that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To me, it comes back to the media literacy conversation of like, I say this to Colin all the time. I say like the world glances, it doesn't read. So like at a glance, it looks official and legitimate.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the same as like you see these advertisements or sponsored posts for like supplement companies where it has someone at a podcast mic looking like this explaining the supplement.
Yeah.
That's just an ad shot at a podcast mic.
Yeah.
But because of the context, the contextual nature of it, it's like that's an expert.
Yeah.
Right. And so like at a glance, you look at the world and like it's organized in this way that makes sense unless you know, again, like it comes back to the media.
I find what you just said so fascinating because like I realized like maybe like a year ago that a lot of these TikToks from TikTokers that are talking into an SM7B, sometimes not even talking to a microphone. There's a different microphone. I could tell because I have one, right? I do audio engineering to a certain degree. So I realized they don't have real podcasts at all.
That's right.
They're simply creating snippets.
Yeah.
If you want to go see the original work, there is none.
There's no
it
source
doesn't
material.
exist.
Yeah.
This is a more legitimate format for Zoomers than the actual TikTok straight to camera format. So in order to create an air of like legitimacy, they fake podcasts. And I'm 32, so from where I'm standing, when I see a podcast, I'm like, that's illegitimate. Yeah. Like I have a podcast. I'm a dickhead. You know what I mean? Like what? That's ridiculous. You think a podcast is serious?
Just because someone brought an SM7B doesn't mean this is
yeah. So I find that fascinating that like people, I guess we've like devolved kind of where what we consider to be like a legitimate expert source is just a guy with an SM7B.
Right.
And more often than not, that guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
I think it's like akin to a pharmaceutical commercial and someone's wearing a white lab coat, but there's no mention of this being a doctor.
Yeah.
But you just glance and you're like, oh, clearly.
But that's like, you know, media drives ideology, right? Like media is the way we understand and organize the world. And so like the democratization of media has now offered the opportunity for everyone to pick from those. Like you go back in time, you think about like, you know, Marlboro cigarettes and like this, the vibe of masculinity, right? And that's able to permeate into society of like, this is what a man looks like.
Yeah.
And that then gives you social cues in a real life environment. But now that real life environment is the internet. And so like the social cues that you can pick up on from media and apply to what you're creating then can also permeate through society.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that it's new, and you see a lot of people in positions of power try to make sense of it and then also control it. You saw this with the TikTok ban as well. Like it was pretty obvious what was going on. They were like, we don't want a foreign government to be able to have such a successful product. There's a business aspect to it. They wanted to take the successful product and basically force China to divest from it and give it to an American capital owner, a guy that we can trust, right? And then there was also the other side of it, the capacity to be able to influence millions of people, change their perspective. Sure. And I think that the lack of control over that was genuinely frustrating for a lot of people in American politics, and that's why they openly were like, "We don't want this. We have to force you to divest." Which we'll see what happens. I don't think I don't know if it'll be successful. Maybe by the time that someone's watching this right now, you'll be laughing at me saying that, but I think that it's very scary for people. The democratization of media is very scary for people, and in certain instances, I get that.
I get it too.
Because if you don't have like organs of government or organs of authority that you can trust to a certain degree that will have your back, right? Or when push comes to shove, they will do the right thing. Then who can you trust? Then we're just completely living in anarchy, and I don't necessarily think that is great. I'm not a committed believer in decentralization of that sort. Although I do benefit greatly from the democratization of media, I do also see how damaging that is in many instances with what I call brain rot, right? There's so much of that. There's so much anti-intellectual sentiment. There's so many people masquerading as intellectuals who don't actually have the academic background at all. Or maybe in many instances in the podcasting world, people do have an academic background in a totally separate field, and then they use that as a position of legitimacy and authority to just promote a side hustle or talk about something entirely irrelevant to their field of study. But now they have this legitimacy. That's why I always say I'm an idiot.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I would imagine people question your legitimacy, your authority, because when you get to a position of not just being someone that grabbed an SM7B and shot something random, but actually having people tune in at the numbers that you have, of course, people are going to assume you have authority, you have legitimacy, you're a leader of a group that people listen to.
Yeah, I don't like when people say that. People do say that. They say, "Oh, are you an activist? Or you're a journalist?" That's why I always say I'm an entertainer. It's a little bit cowardly to just hide behind that. But the reality is, ultimately, I don't want people to engage in any sort of like idolization, right? And that's why I'm always like, I'm a human being. I have the capacity to fail. I have the capacity to lead you astray from time to time. I will do my very best to not do that, to make sure that doesn't happen. But ultimately, I could still get some things wrong, right? And I want people to see what I'm saying, listen to what I'm saying, and internalize it and try to understand what I'm saying rather than like who I am as a person. The who I am as a person obviously is important because of the medium. People care about that sort of thing. You develop a parasocial relationship with your favorite content creator. But I want that to just be a way to open that door to charitability so that you can maybe cultivate an understanding of a different perspective that you've never heard before, that you've never really actually explored.
Mm-hmm. At face value, I'm sure, just to come back to the business of this, like I'm sure a lot of people, I know it actually for a fact, we talked about it, but like people look at you and go, all right, well, this is also just a great way for you to make money. You drive a nice car, you drive a Porsche, you bought a nice house, you wear nice clothes. But then I hear about your schedule and I think to myself, like, yeah, you do make good money, but you don't have any time to spend it.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Or like
No,
I don't like what do you do?
Or you're spending it in the way that you
Or
want
you're
to spend
spending-
it that doesn't sound interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
us.
the way there was a clip that actually went out of context on this exact thing that you're talking about, where I was talking about like not endlessly trying to engage in profit-seeking behavior for purely making more money. And I remember addressing it because I was like, I love what I do. This is what gives me fulfillment. This is what I have a lot of autonomy over my life. I have a lot of autonomy over my work. If I wanted to, I could stop, right? And society has offered me many different ways of just like, at this point, generating revenue with the pre-existing capital that I have. It's, as a matter of fact, society's like telling me to do that instead. That's the dream, right? That's the American dream, is that you have enough money, you generate enough money, and then you put that money in the stock market, and then you never have to work. And that kind of capital accumulation is something that obviously I think is not great in general. And I think that there's a lot of systemic problems that stem from that, but I'm not even going to get into the dense theory of it all. I simply enjoy what I do, and I want to be able to do it for as long as I can get enjoyment and fulfillment out of it. And I have enough that I can launch projects if I choose to, give money to charities when I want to, and be able to do cool things and reinvest it into, I guess, my business.
As much as we can like describe it to or describe your career as the radio or Rush Limbaugh, I'm curious, do your parents understand it? Like, do they understand it, appreciate the career that you've built for yourself?
At first they didn't. I'm the only person in my family that does not have anything above a Bachelor of Arts and Sciences. So I went to college, I graduated, that was it for me. My father has a doctorate in economics from the London School of Economics. My mom recently just graduated, got her PhD, went back to college, and got a PhD. My brother has a master's. So I'm a little bit like the black sheep of the family in that sort. And my dad, for years, anytime he would see me, anytime we had a phone conversation, he'd be like, son, when are you going to go back to school? And he would say that over and over again. But that's because I was super broke, 10 years ago, and was like trying to do all this stuff. That stopped around 5 years ago. And I think it stopped when they were like, okay, you're making a lot of money. That's fine. You don't have to go to school anymore. So they don't bother me anymore with higher education, which is ironic because I do sometimes think about it. Like if I were to ever stop, I'd probably do that. I'd probably go back to college. But they get it. Mm-hmm. They understand it.
And what was your relationship to money growing up?
I come from a very affluent background for Turkey, which probably would make you like middle class in America, but like for Turkey, it was really good. And I guess like my relationship with money was that I didn't really care about it at all. My parents wouldn't spoil me. They spoiled my brother a lot more than me because he's the second one, right? Because he's coming after me. So I had to fight these battles to get a cell phone and things like that. And he never had to, he just took it for granted. And I never really cared about money until I didn't have it.
Sure.
I started caring about money when I got out of college and I didn't have like a decent paying job and I was budgeting like crazy. I was getting overdraft fees and then you're cooked because then the way that the Bank of America used to operate, they would like hit you with like 8 different, they would massage the numbers in a way to make sure that you get like, right as you're nearing the red, they boom hit you with like 8 different payments, so that all of a sudden you got like 8 different overdraft fees. I went through all of that, and that's when definitely when I was like, oh shit, this is not great.
And what is your current relationship with capitalism versus socialism? Because I've heard you talk about this before. And I was very curious to talk to you about it in the context of like the world of creators and how we operate. Because there's there's like an organization of the game of being a creator that is inherently, it operates within the confines and the lines of capitalism.
Of course.
Right.
Everything does.
Everything does. But I'm saying like the video game of being a creator, of rankings, of understanding your viewership, of understanding this infinite level of growth that you have the opportunity for on a week-to-week basis.
Mm-hmm.
How does that play into your relationship with money today?
I mean, I have the fortune to not care about it.
Right.
And I think that is, again, because I got unimaginably lucky that I was able to that I was able to do this thing on Twitch and be able to become incredibly successful, which is like, 1 in a million chance, right? That I have the freedom and the privilege not to care about like consistently needing to generate more revenue. Especially because, like I said, I get my emotional fulfillment elsewhere. A lot of people, I think, pursue money for the sake of money. There's a certain point that you need to do it. All right. Like money isn't everything. Not having it is a bit of a cliche, but it's true. Like it definitely was for me as well. When I was broke as hell, it definitely was the most important thing. It was like a weight that I always had to carry everywhere. So yes, I think the relationship that I have with money is that it's freedom. It gives you the freedom to say fuck you to advertisers if you want to. It gives you the freedom to say whatever you want as long as you believe it's true. It doesn't matter. That is my relationship with money. And as long as I don't have that fear, as long as I don't have that weight back on my shoulders, I can just consistently keep maxing out as much as I want to on the content front.
Yeah.
As someone who tracks injustice, highlights it, do you see anything within the confines of the creator economy with the relationship between creators and platforms?
Oh yeah.
That you feel is unjust or that needs to be changed, that maybe is not worthy of like being talked about on one of your streams, but within the confines of like, this is what we talk about here.
Well, I mean, look, obviously I am in a very fortunate predicament. So I have a lot of leverage. I have a lot of bargaining power because like, this platform is generating a lot of revenue and getting prestige from having someone like myself on it, right? For Twitch. And I also have the opportunity to maybe go to another platform and be like, hey, I'll take a deal with you guys, and they don't want that, right? They don't want the exclusivity to go away usually. Having said that, however, I mean, the streaming economy is a monopoly. Amazon runs it. Twitch is the dominant force owned by Amazon. YouTube kind of came in as a player. Microsoft made an attempt. It fell apart. Going back to the main point, although I am very fortunate, I think that there are millions of content creators who are not in that same situation, and they have no bargaining power. They have no bargaining power in the same way that Uber drivers don't have any bargaining power against Uber. And I think here in America especially, we have basically decided that is just the way that we're going to operate. And we even have resentment towards any kind of like unionization initiative on that front. Having said that, however, with respect to Twitch streaming, given the barrier of entry being marginal, anyone and everyone can become a streamer or a content creator in general. It makes, I think, any kind of labor initiative, any kind of like unionization initiative become impossible. So you're at the whims of you're at the whims and the mercy of the corporation. So if Amazon decides, Twitch, you're not making enough money, you got to serve ads. Maybe you don't want to serve ads. There's not really much you can do. You have to serve it, right? Because what are you going to do? Build your own platform? You can't do that. And even if you do build your own platform, you're still paying AWS. Right. There is no alternative. In the most long and convoluted sense of the word, streaming is susceptible to the exact same market forces under capitalism as anything else. And you as a consumer, if you're wondering, why the fuck am I seeing so many goddamn ads on this platform? What the hell's going on? That is a directive given to Twitch by Amazon, who has a bunch of quants and a bunch of mathematicians with PhDs sitting in a room, constantly figuring out new ways of maximizing revenue, that decided, this is what we should be doing with Twitch. in an effort to generate more revenue and take advantage of the monopoly that we have in the live streaming space. And then you as a consumer experience that in the form of seeing ads.
And probably at scale, though, for a large portion of consumers, the nature of human beings and hedonic adaptation would be that, like, okay, there's more ads, but after a week, I just get used to it.
Absolutely.
Right?
We have
and
an
then
incredible
scale that out across
everything.
Everything.
No, absolutely. We have a phenomenal capacity to adapt. I think that's
Right.
like, if we're thinking about man as an entity, as a unit, like that is like our most incredible capacity. And it can be for good or it can be for bad, right? Like we do prevail and we do adapt to the conditions no matter what. And I think that you're absolutely right. People get used to it. They find different ways of maybe using an ad blocker or just subscribing. And inevitably they're just like, yeah, I'm dealing with it. Who cares? Or maybe they just sit there and watch it.
Yeah, I mean, you could scale that all the way up to like the political climate.
Exactly.
Like
That's what
it's
I'm
just
saying. There's like hedonic adaptation at every level. Right?
yeah, things feel crazy, and then all of a sudden, 8 years later, you're like, oh, maybe this is just the way politics are now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that's very scary when you think about what we're heading towards, I would say. Not to get too political, but yeah, that is definitely true.
With this being an election year, I'm curious your perspective on how politicians should be engaging with social platforms. Obviously, we've seen AOC on stream with you. We've seen politics take to the landscape of like the democratization of media and social. But I'm curious your perspective on like how should politicians engage with the creator space? Like, should they be streaming? Should they be making vlogs? Should they be tweeting? Like, what is how should we engage with politicians in the social landscape?
I'll tell you this much. I would rather have a politician never touch a single social media platform, but then also, but genuinely be invested in like the things that they supposedly care about, like eliminating poverty, combating homelessness. I would much rather have them actually do the things that they say they're going to do when the election time comes around, and not even like, I guess, utilize social media. But I guess the other side of it is it's another mechanism for communication and branding yourself and trying to gain more supporters. But I think overall, I don't necessarily care about the PR side of it as much as I care about like the actual impact, the actual legislation, the actual follow through on the legislative promises that politicians make. I mean, the Biden administration recently came out with a job opportunity. They're looking for a meme manager. It's
like
$85,000.
Meme manager?
A meme manager, a meme creator.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. Like that is just so incredibly silly in my opinion. You're just doing that because you just want to do it so that you've tried your best, I guess. It almost feels like lip service where it's like, yeah, sure, we're doing it. Like Biden is literally trying to ban TikTok, openly advocating to ban TikTok while simultaneously posting TikToks. Like that is an inconsistency that I think even the dumbest American, and many of us are very dumb, myself included, will see and go, what? Like you're posting on TikTok, but you want to ban TikTok? What's happening here? So I think I like I said, I care more about like the actual campaign promises they make and follow through on.
I just question the level, and this actually across all of us, like whatever you do, like accessibility, right? Like how accessible should someone be? And specifically someone in politics, like
I think they should be way more accessible than the average celebrity.
And in what I agree with that. And what venues should they be accessible?
I think that they should be doing town halls in person and also be accessible online as well in that regard, for sure. I think that they should be, if they're doing things that their constituents don't appreciate, they should have to face them.
When you have a politician on stream, can that be taken as an endorsement?
I guess yes and no. I don't think I've ever worked with a politician that I don't fully align with though, or not fully align with, or like align with in any capacity. So I don't think I would do that.
Do you ever like go out into the world, like go to a coffee shop and crave anonymity? Like, do you ever crave like what your life was like pre making videos, pre being like a Twitch streamer, being this?
Yes, for sure. When I go out in public, for sure, there are moments where I'm like, oh shit, like I don't want to be seen right now. You know what I mean? I don't want to be, I don't want to be noticed. And it does happen sometimes. Where, I mean, it happens all the time, but like in like 99% of the interactions is super positive and wonderful. So it doesn't really bother me as much. And I enjoy it. I enjoy putting a face to the username, right? All of a sudden, instead of like someone online, this is a real human being with goals, aspirations. And when they say like, oh, you've changed my mind on this, I love that. That's great. But there are definitely a lot of, privacy concerns. There's a lot of stuff that creators regularly will not discuss in an effort not to create, in an effort not to legitimize. And on that front, yes, I definitely wish that I was I could be more private.
Because you're very different from other streamers because of your subject matter.
Yeah.
So like people's relationship with you and the things you say have a lot more of like a guttural either love or hate, or like you live in the polarities, right? And so like different from like a Ludwig who's like, I hung out with that guy and he made me laugh when I watched the stream. You have a very different relationship.
For sure.
And the premise of also your show or what you do is interactive news. So it's also very different where it's like if I'm watching the news, or when I grew up watching the news, I can't comment and have the broadcaster say something based on what I just said, or argue with me or debate with me live. And that's like crowdsourced across hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
That's a very different parasocial relationship than other parasocial relationships.
For sure. There's like so much access.
Yeah.
I feel like streamers are in this weird intersection where they're not like real celebrities. But I mean, at least the top streamers, like they make a lot of money, sometimes even more than like traditional celebrities do. Having said that, however, in many instances, like traditional celebrities can maintain a level of privacy, like a Hollywood actor is only going to, especially when they have PR, especially when they have studios that are also like multi-billion-dollar companies that are also maintaining the image of an actor, right? They can put their best foot forward at all times. Streamers can't really do that because like the nature of our content is interactive. So obviously there's always going to be people trying to trip you and that's fine. But no matter what, there's going to be a weak moment in a 10-hour time frame. And I think that like that weak moment of maybe emotional immaturity can be, broadcasted to millions of people, or someone can misunderstand you, and then that can be broadcasted to millions of people, and that like your point could be misconstrued and even weaponized against you in a very meaningful way. And beyond that, I think that like, people, when they see that, maybe they harbor hostility and resentment towards you because I don't fault them. They're not supposed to go in and find out what I actually am about or whatever. They just see that and they're like, fuck this guy. Right. And I get it. And, that aspect of it definitely is shitty, where it's like, I made you, like I gave you $5 a month. Like I have a say in how you conduct your affairs. You better not piss me off.
It's like I paid taxes to this community.
Yeah, I'm propping you up literally.
Yeah. They don't see it in the same way when they go watch a movie. They're not like, Chris Hemsworth, how dare you?
Yeah. Or even Jake Tapper, right? It's like,
Yeah.
if I don't like what Jake Tapper is saying, I just change the channel.
Yeah.
Right.
And people don't view it in the same way when you're like super accessible. So it's the other side of the parasocial coin.
Is there anything you've learned about people you're at odds with in terms of the difference between interacting with them online and meeting them in person?
Yeah. I went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner many, many years back. Not the actual dinner, but like events that the Young Turks was putting together. over the weekend. And my hatred for DC amplified. I mean, it was like, I hate the moral rot so much, especially in media, because these guys at events were so excited to see, like, you know, Scaramucci or people that, like, they act like they despise on camera. You know what I mean? And I think for a lot of people in mainstream media, not everyone, but for a lot of people in like mainstream media, especially like the on-camera talent and whatnot, it is really Hollywood for ugly people. Like, it just is, they just care about like the superstar celebrity status of people more than they care about their perspectives. And even with people that I've like debated in the past, they would DM me and be like, hey, you want to get drinks? And I'll be like, fuck no. Like, what? No, we just, do you think I was faking it? Like, when I was talking about all the things that I believe in and how antagonistic you are towards that. Going back to the empathy question that you had, actually, one thing that I failed to mention is that I have endless empathy for those who I feel have been maybe blinded by or maybe are on their own journey of self-reflection and maybe changing their attitudes. But I don't have any empathy for professional commentators. If you're a professional commentator, political commentator, and you are routinely churning out this propaganda on the right, I have all the smoke for you. I will not empathize.
Are you not a professional commentator?
I am.
You are.
Yeah.
Oh, you're saying,
Yeah.
but a professional commentator on the other side?
Yeah.
Got it.
Because I feel like you have this responsibility. You have you have not only these opinions, but you are like actively trying to change people's minds to agree with you, or feeding them an endless amount of information in a certain direction that like feeds into their biases. And I feel like it's damaging overall to both public discourse and to improving everyone's lives. So like, yeah, if you're constantly talking about like police brutality as a necessary byproduct of governance, for example, and I'm using very light terms here. If you're basically saying black people deserve to be brutalized, I don't fuck with you. Fuck you. If you're constantly talking about like trans people and engaging with this like trans panic, I don't fuck with you. I'm not gonna hang out with you. I'm not gonna be friends with you. I'm not gonna get drinks with you, especially if you're like a political commentator who legitimately is at least portraying themselves as invested in this matter. I think that's ridiculous.
Because they're not open to other perspectives, or because they're...
No, because I think that they're doing something that's harmful.
Got it.
I think that they're actively radicalizing people in the wrong direction. People can say that about me too.
Right.
As long as you just address what I'm saying, as long as you have an issue with my perspective, fine. We can have a conversation. And I'm not even talking about like, oh, you claim to be a socialist, but you have a house. Like, not the bullshit. I mean like real things that you genuinely disagree with the way I see the world, and not like vaguely gesturing at things that other people have told you is wrong because of your own personal misconceptions about what it means to advocate for progress,
I think that a lot of that comes back to like something that has come up quite a bit in our conversation is clips. And I feel like clips are the units of conversation of our current world, right? Like a DM on Instagram of a clip is how you connect with someone, whether that's a funny clip or something that would make you angry or make you agree, whatever it is. Like the clips are the currency of conversation in today's social economy.
Yeah.
And I was curious now, just on that nature of clips, like clips almost for someone like Twitch streamers or commentary creators feel almost akin to like a highlight for an athlete.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's good to have a ton of clips out there, and good clips of yourself doing your craft well is a positive thing.
Yeah.
You've also now opened up the copyright, or maybe that was forever. Like you don't copyright strike anyone who clips your content and puts it across YouTube.
Yeah.
Right?
From the jump, I've always, I personally think that copyright stunts innovation in general. So I personally don't appreciate copyright at all. Obviously, there are certain instances where it can be valid, but very limited and certainly not directed towards like mega corporations that are using this as a vehicle to just try to farm as much revenue as possible off this product long after it should have been opened up to every single person. I've always told people, like, if you want to make a channel, like a fan channel, and upload whatever you want from my streams, you can do so. We call it the Hasan Piker Industrial Complex. And there are a ton of channels, like maybe 50, some of which are very successful, some of which are very big channels with literally YouTube check marks, as a matter of fact. I just know that because I'm churning out 10 hours of content, like there's just no way I'm not going to be able to package it and repackage it and reformat it and upload it. I don't want to do that, so go off, make money, make your own money off of it if you would like to do so. And it's been very successful for a very long time. YouTube has kind of tackled it a little bit. They call it duplicate content. Mm-hmm. So they just like take them down in many instances. But I think as long as they are editing them too, like who cares? It's great. It does limit your capacity to, I guess, like manicure your message.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
You have way less control over your message.
Yeah, you have way less control over it. And it does get me into trouble every now and then, and it has in the past. Because like, I don't know someone makes a thumbnail and a title that I don't agree with. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden someone could just like clip that or someone could take a screenshot of it and be like, look at this asshole. Well, and it's like, well, I didn't do that.
It even happens to us though on like a minor level. It can be a minor shift. There's a few accounts that clip out everything from our show that has to do with money. So the majority of the clips about our show are all about money.
Yeah.
But like this episode has not been, entirely about money.
No.
Right? But that is often the image that can go out into the world because that's the sheer number of clips. Like that's the majority.
I think though sensationalism wins in an ad-based economy, right? In an ad-based content economy, sensationalism wins.
Absolutely.
And I think that's also like, again, when it comes to the news, when it comes to anything, right? And I think that brings into question, like, I've been thinking about this a lot of how do we diversify ourselves so we're not so ad-based, right? Because then you do inherently, if you're running a business, you make decisions based on what's going to work. And what's going to work, oftentimes, Andrew Schultz said this, he said, like, what works right now is a car crash on the internet, right?
He's right. And fights, car crashes, like, and then if you play that out to like discussions, of course, it's much more interesting. If we were sitting at this table aggressively arguing, it would be much more interesting. Yeah.
If the title was confronting the most controversial streamer, which is out there.
You should put that out there. You should have confronted me more.
Right.
I mean, I don't mind it.
Totally.
I know it's a part of the game.
It's a part of the game, and it's more interesting, and it works better in an ad-based economy.
Yeah.
Is that a problem?
Yes and no. I think that we just can't necessarily force people to appreciate polite discourse.
Sure.
If they just don't like it, they don't like it, right? I mean, I have a similar issue with debate, online debate.
Okay.
Online debates they can be productive, right? And it is, but broadly, it is very toxic. It creates a very toxic environment, and I don't think it is a good environment for learning or appreciating a different perspective.
When you say online debates, what do you mean? You mean like
online debates is like I went to I don't know, like a right-wing podcast and sat there and owned them.
Got it.
Right? And it is like hyper sensationalized. It basically does exactly what you have gripes with, but for political discourse. Mm-hmm. And because my goal isn't necessarily to just like max out my visibility and show myself as this like supposed intellectual gladiator or whatever, I usually stay away from them. And I mean, I still do it when there's like a valid platform or a person that I definitely would love to would love to talk to or debate, duke it out, if you will, in the marketplace of ideas like Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder or something. But beyond that, I don't think it's like I don't personally think it's very productive. It's rather self-serving, even, where you're not really going into the nuances in many instances of what your worldview is, and you're simply playing a game of maybe even chess or checkers, where you have established what the interlocutor's talking points are, you know what they are, and you have your talking points, and the goal is to basically overpower your opponent with rhetoric, which is why someone who is maybe not very intelligent, or not, I wouldn't say intelligent, but like knowledgeable, can debate someone who is very knowledgeable and still come across like they have, I guess, functionally won the argument. Like a Ben Shapiro could go up against a climate scientist, and as a climate denier, a climate change denier, he could functionally, through rhetoric, appear to a not very knowledgeable audience as though he won. But that doesn't change the truth of the matter. That doesn't change the scientific consensus on the matter. And I think that at the end of the day is unproductive in general. It's sensationalized. It gets people excited. It shows your side winning over the other side. And a lot of people are interested and invested in the blood sport. And I engage in it sometimes, like I'll go on the Piers Morgan show or whatever, for that reason, because I think that it opens the door to a broader audience. But ultimately, if that's all I would do, I feel like it would not genuinely change people's perceptions at all, because they would just be invested in the blood sport rather than, they would be more invested in the rhetoric, and it would devolve into sophistry rather than the actual ideas that I want people to really try to tackle and maybe even change their minds on.
I'm curious about how you feel about the general health of the streaming economy and where it's headed. Like, is it still a great place for someone to enter into? What is the health of the business of streaming?
I think it was the Wild West, maybe like in the 2016 to 2018 era. And I think it peaked for sure as far as it being the Wild West. Lack of terms of service and like lack of content moderation, and also on top of that, like just so much unimaginable amounts of money being thrown in this space in general.
Through like exclusive contracts?
Through exclusive contracts, through revenue splits in general. And I think now it's like kind of trying to land in a place that is more sustainable. That stuff was never going to continue, obviously. Like, I never saw this side of it because I came into the space, or I was too small at the time when this stuff was happening. But like Ninja, Tfue, all these people like getting, $30 million contracts.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Whatever, like that is unimaginable, right? The only way you can get that now is if you are like sponsored basically by a unregulated crypto gambling casino based out of the Cayman Islands or whatever. Like there's no other way that you're getting numbers like that. And even then, those guys can't.
What does a Twitch contract
They may not pay
today
you.
look like? Like
There are none.
There's no Twitch contract.
I am
no
the-
exclusive contracts.
I think the last Twitch contract officially.
And a Twitch contract means here's a guaranteed amount, and is that against your
It
subscription?
changes. It changes for every single person. It's very dynamic. It's very different. Some people will have MGs, minimum guarantees, where they're like, you're going to get this money no matter what.
Right.
We're just giving you this money at the end of the year. If you don't generate this revenue through your subscriptions and through your ads or whatever, you're still going to get it regardless. Some people have incentive-based contracts where they're like, you have to hit these minimum standards, KPIs, and then you will get, like a monthly stipend on top of the revenue that you have. Some people will have contracts or did have contracts rather, because like I said, they don't do them anymore, where you are generating revenue up to a certain point, and then the rest of it the company takes, right? Because like they're already paid for it or something like that. And then there's like bounty systems on top of that. I don't know if they still have it. I've never seen a bounty board, but Twitch used to have like an internal user board basically for like being able to pick some kind of ad, like some kind of sponsorship to play like a game for an hour or 2 hours.
Got it.
Or whatever. And then there's like ad incentives. I don't know where we're at with ad incentives now, where I think like they were trying to get people to run ads. So they would give them extra money if they ran like, 10 minutes ads per hour. And then like the more they do that, they gamified it basically. The more you do that, the more money you get, that sort of thing. And then there's like, I guess across the board, maybe not a MG, but just like straight up, here's the revenue. Here's just $30 million to be on our platform. I assume that's how it worked back then. All that's gone.
Why are you the last Twitch contract?
I think it happened to be that way. Like I was the last person to negotiate my contract, I think.
So
like,
then once
and then
that
they're
contract's
done.
up,
Yeah.
that's it.
If you get an offer from YouTube, would you go to YouTube?
Potentially. I have investigated the streaming space on YouTube. I think that there's a lot of issues. A lot of issues with like lack of moderation, a lot of issues with like not being able to have a space specifically for live streaming. I don't think YouTube across the board cares about live streaming as much. I think that they like ventured into it, but then they were like, oh, short form content is king. We should actually invest more into shorts. And I think that they generate so much more revenue because live streaming is like hard to generate revenue off of in general. We still haven't been able to figure out an adequate way of, not for the streamers themselves, I'm saying like for the platforms. It's very, it's too much bandwidth and too much money on the back end that you need to spend to do live web hosting in real time with not a lot of revenue to make up for the cost.
Yeah.
So I think
you're streaming like 70, 80 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Live in high def, just straight up. Like that is significant bandwidth.
Yeah, that's unimaginable amounts of money. So I think I would say that that this is the reason why YouTube doesn't care about live streaming and like beefing up live streaming as much. And I don't think they're not giving contracts anymore either.
Yeah. What role does YouTube play in your sort of content ecosystem?
Twitch is very insulated as a platform. It has, it develops these communities that are super loyal, unlike anything else online, anything else. Like there's nothing that you can compare it to. However, because of that, there is no like real VOD mechanism. Like they have VODs, but it's, it's whatever. And they go away after like 90 days, I think.
Oh, wow.
Oh, they don't store like a catalog
No.
of videos?
No discovery then.
No. And yes, there's no discoverability on Twitch for the most part, unless you're at the top of the leaderboard. That's why it's a very top heavy platform in general. And the issue is, or I guess like because of that, you need to be present on every other platform and oftentimes drive traffic back to Twitch. Like that is the successful method. You blow up, you go viral over and over again, either on Reddit or on Twitter or on YouTube or on TikTok, and then you try to bring that content back into Twitch, that audience back into Twitch, sorry. Very successful examples of this on TikTok are Jinxie and Queso. These guys have, even go so far as to say Kai Cenat, who was a Twitch streamer, and he really blew up on TikTok. Aiden Ross also, when he was a Twitch streamer, blew up on TikTok and then was able to like convert those people, enough people, hundreds of millions of people are seeing these TikTok clips, and then, 10,000 people go and watch you. That's massive. That's ginormous. That's a ginormous amount of people. So I think that there are still examples of this, and it's mostly coming from TikTok, but YouTube is still important as well for putting your best face forward, I guess.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the landscape of streaming right now is so fascinating to me, especially with Kai. I think like to watch Kai enter into mainstream culture in the way that he has, like I feel like more than YouTube creators, streamers are able to enter the mainstream in a completely different way.
Yeah, YouTube.
Why do you think that is?
Because YouTube is still like not as, I think YouTube is still just not as personable. Like there's still like a level of lack of access that comes from like doing a YouTube video, making a YouTube video, right?
It was like premeditated.
Yeah.
Even Kevin Hart, right?
On
With Kai. It's like, it's so, the barrier to entry to join a live stream is so low. It's like, Kevin, here's what we're going to do. Just show up. And we'll like riff and we'll have fun.
He has to go to Kai's.
Sure. But if he's making
house,
a YouTube
like, that's
video, it's probably way more extensive of like, we're going to shoot this whole thing that has to have a story arc.
I think there's an element of threat for the content creator as well. Like there's an element of danger, literally, for your reputation when you join this like environment.
The Twitch
that that
streaming
can be,
environment.
anything can happen.
That can be hostile.
I think with that concept of like everything is like what works today is a car crash. Kevin Hart going on Kai's stream is like you're waiting for something to happen, right? Like it's gonna like something crazy.
And Kai is good at making things happen. Literally nonstop, wall to wall.
Yeah,
when he's
YouTube
live,
it's too safe.
Yeah,
if you watch a YouTube video, you know it's been looked after, it's been edited, everything's been chosen.
What do you think a healthy content diet is for someone? Like someone wakes up in the morning, they want to know what's going on in the world.
Oof.
What is a healthy content diet?
You're asking a crackhead. So it's like, I'm the worst person to give people advice on this front. You know, ask me about fitness. I'll talk to you all day. I'll give you great advice. Ask me about healthy content. I don't know. I mean, for me, I pay attention to mainstream media in general, like a lot of NPR, New York Times, all of these outlets, Democracy Now, and then beyond that, I think I don't necessarily consume a lot of Twitch content. I don't at all, actually.
Interesting.
Partially because I'm live for most of the duration of the day, and when I'm off, I actually watch, traditional stuff. I watch movies. I watch anime.
Yeah.
I watch TV shows. So that's what I, in the brief moments that I have to myself, that's what I like to consume. That's what I like to enjoy.
Yeah.
Not a lot of YouTube. Not a lot of. Sometimes I've been on TikTok more because of Twitter being just this like right wing, constant car crashes.
Yeah.
It's like this awful platform to be on, where I started noticing that it was like genuinely shaping the way I view myself, even because like obviously I'm in a different situation than the average person, because like there's a lot of hate that you can get online, and Twitter was basically like constantly feeding me this information, and I was like, damn, like, man, people hate me. And I didn't realize that, like, in the words of Tyler, the creator, which I will not repeat, just turn it off. How is online bullying real? Just turn your monitor off. I kind of did that, and it did actually greatly improve my mental health. So, not just like the hate threads or whatever, but beyond that, I think like seeing constant death and destruction, and just like senseless violence and so much unfiltered bigotry. Oh my God. Twitter becoming this like shithole, kind of moved me in the direction of TikTok a little bit, which feeds you what you want to see. And it does a very good job of feeding you what you want to see. It picks up on a little thing. Maybe you watch one Kyrie Irving slow motion video where you see the man just demonstrate the best ball handling you've ever seen in your entire life. And then you watch that for an extended period of time. TikTok's like, that's what you want. You want more Kyrie Irving ball handling videos. Yeah. And TikTok is right. They're right. I do want to watch it. I just sit there.
At least you can have the confidence when you're on Twitter knowing it doesn't know what you want. So you shouldn't take it that personally, right? Like with TikTok, it's like a reflection of you. And so you got to kind of check yourself.
I think TikTok did that really well because it feeds into like things that you want to see. I think Twitter is doing the reverse of it. Their For You page mechanism is like they want to max out on, every platform wants to max out on, making sure you spend as much time on there as possible and maybe see some ads, right? Twitter, I think, was like, oh, what pops off on Twitter? Discourse, like antagonistic discourse. So they just feed you everything you don't want to see. But when you see it, you're like, oh, I have to write something here. I'm mad. I'm angry. So that's like, it's not good for your mental health. Whereas I feel like TikTok, very addictive, also bad in a different way. is just basically showing you things you do want to see and things that you are interested in, and it's feeding you more and more of that. So it is addictive in the opposite direction, but I think ultimately, I guess like a healthier direction.
I think you are right. I was
Maybe. I don't know. My stuff's pretty weird.
I was searching your name on Twitter and just to read up on some of your tweets and things like that. And then right after, we got served a post for Hustlers University from Andrew Tate. And I was like, in what world would we ever get served Hustlers University? It is so far from what we would consume.
Well, because I've debated Andrew
You've debated
Tate.
him, yeah.
So immediately, and his haters, like, I mean, not his haters, his fans, like, grab onto everything.
Algorithmically, Twitter's like, okay, you want in on this fight.
Yeah, you're a loyal soldier now.
So I guess I'll say, like, with all of us being the voices now of the internet, right? Like, people find their own voices they want to listen to, on the internet. We also are now the next wave of employers, right? A lot of us have employees, we have teams. So how do you think about like how we should be organizing our own companies to pave a path for a better future for the workforce, for like society? Like, how do you think about that for yourself, and how do you think about that for others?
It's a great question. So for me, I know Ludwig talked about setting up a cooperative, which I talked to him quite a bit about when he was launching that initiative. I also run a cooperative structure, and for the most part, I don't view the products that I'm making as like its own thing that is going to be like revenue generation. I see it as marketing, if you want to think about it that way. Like YouTube, for example, my YouTube is always in the red with my compensation structure for my editors. Right, it's always in the red. It's never, especially recently since like October 7. It's the CPMs are unimaginably low. View counts are down, but it doesn't matter to me because I see that as like a more important to have like at least my own VOD content, right? And they do a phenomenal job. But on other aspects, like the podcast, for example, it's like it's a revenue sharing structure that is equal and evenly parsed out. I had the opportunity when I was building the podcast, for example.
That across the hosts and the
producers,
team.
Yeah.
So everyone has an equal share in that.
Yeah, everyone has an equal share, but more importantly, everyone has an equal voice. I think that is like also very important. Like if we want to make a decision, if we want to, and we have the benefit of like being a smaller group, obviously. So like it's much easier in that circumstance than like I don't know, like the factory floor with an assembly line or whatever, but like you can still, and many companies successfully do this, have a cooperative structure. And I think that like lends itself to long-term sustainability because you are no longer as susceptible to market factors and can withstand certain crashes much better than other corporations can.
What does progress look like today for you in your creator career? Is it just like maintaining viewership, maintaining subscribers? Is it showing up more on traditional outlets? Is it like moderating debates between politicians? Like, do you have a vision of, okay, if I go down this path, this is where I want to be?
Progress for me would be, brutally honest, more viewership. Progress for me would be, don't care about the revenue aspect of it. If it happens, it happens. That's great. But what I would care about the most is having a much broader, much more diverse, much larger, younger as well, audience that is tuning in and is maybe picking up certain things from what I have to say, and it's causing them to self-reflect. That's what I care about. That's what progress is for me. It's not about like getting on traditional media. It's not about moderating politics, it's not moderating political debates or anything like that. That's my main focus is how do I get more people invested in seeing the world at least a little bit more skeptically and a little bit more critically, viewing the media in a little bit more critical way of a lens and trying to understand that you know, the systems that we exist under, we should not take them for granted. They have not been that way for as long as we've, they've been that way for as long as we've been alive, but that doesn't mean that they can't change.
I really like self-reflection as a goal and as a point of progress. Like for me, my perspective on all this is like, I think empathy is incredibly important. I think discourse is incredibly important. I think understanding a lot of perspectives are important, all with the goal of self-reflection. My fear is that we, in this world of democratization of media, have learned a lot about what works and how you can create a business out of what works. And I think sometimes those are at odds. And I think that's
No, for sure.
That's the challenge as we move forward in this landscape.
Yeah.
What's the retirement plan of a streamer? Like we've talked to Ludwig about this. Ludwig said he wants to bake bread. Like the retirement plan of a streamer, is it just like for you, at what point do you not stream 7 days a week?
I'll die probably.
So the retirement plan is just die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Understood.
It's my retirement plan.
All right.
I mean, who knows? Who knows?
Like with Kai, like what does Kai do? Does Kai do this for the next 10 years?
I mean, I can't speak for him personally. I don't know, but like I suspect that his goal probably is to go into traditional media and like become an actor and become like the next Kevin Hart potentially, right? And I think that like a lot of people see it as a jump off point, like Twitch streaming. Whereas like I, on the other hand, don't see Twitch streaming as like a jump off point or a way to build like sustainable revenue. I see it as like, this is what I want to do. Many people throughout my career, especially like in the aftermath of the 2020 election, when more people started tuning in and started paying attention, asked me like, oh, do you want to go to CNN? I've talked to people at CNN. I've talked to I've talked to people in traditional media that were interested in bringing me on board. And I have always refused because, and that's why when you ask me like, what do you want to do? What's your next step? It's like what I'm doing right now, but at a much larger level. What I'm doing right now, as long as if there was 300,000 people tuning in instead of 30,000 or 20,000, I'm set. That's it. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do.
I had another question for you about streaming. I was curious your perspective on IRL streaming, like people going out into the world with a camera and streaming. Like that has been that to me feels like a very new format.
That's actually a very old format.
That's like the original Twitch.
That's the original Twitch.
I guess that's Justin TV.
And it was really bad.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying when I was at Wild West. Like that back then, it was like crazy.
But the reemergence of that, or like that starting to come back to me, feels like a reversion back to the Wild West in a way that feels uncomfortable.
It definitely is like bigger now though. Like back then it was just like it was straightforward. You have an IRL bag that you just take out into the wild and do crazy stuff, right? I love IRL streaming. And when I was a much smaller content creator, I did it all the time. I would IRL stream going to get groceries. My first ever during COVID, when we had the lockdowns and then they were like letting us go into the grocery store, I IRL'd that process. It was crazy. It was like a zombie movie, no cars, nothing, right? And I IRL streamed that process, and I would just like take my dog to the dog park, stream that, play basketball, stream that, and nowadays I feel like you can't really do that for two reasons. One, if I do that, I'm getting swarmed no matter what.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where I go. Like I'll go to Tokyo, I'm getting fucking swarmed in Tokyo, which is insane. The exact opposite time zone. You know, I don't know how no matter where I go, it turns into like a meet and greet. So it has to be like very structured and it has to be in a closed environment. I still do it. And I still try to do it and try to freestyle with it. But overall, I think nowadays, the other reason is that content has been like greatly elevated by the likes of Kai. I call it the MrBeast-ification of like Twitch, the Kai Sanatification and many others that have like greatly elevated the type of content that people are expecting. So
just in their like segmentation of it, or in the
car crash that's
writing.
Yeah, like the craziness. Like they want you to do something crazy, right? Like you can't just like do regular monotonous boring things and like talk to your audience. Like people go, this is kind of boring, I'm tuning out. You know, I'd rather go watch.
Where does that take us? Where does like the pushing the boundaries of what can happen live take us?
I think it can go to a dangerous place, as it has with like really awful content creators in like Japan and whatnot, like yelling Hiroshima and Nagasaki at like Japanese people in the subway and even getting arrested time and time again. And then people are like, I don't want this anymore. Like, you're done. No one can do this anymore, which is awful in general. Or you can go to a good place where it kind of forces you to really think about what kind of content that you want to make in the IRL sphere, where you can't just like explore, but now you have to, like, I went to a restaurant that has active sumo wrestlers that wrestle one another, and we asked them if we could wrestle them. So I wrestled with like a former sumo champion on camera, and that was awesome. That was like something that I had to plan out, and it makes it less accessible for the average person to be able to do so. But like, I think it elevated my content that way.
It's more produced. Meaning, not necessarily like high production quality, but just more thought out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what Jimmy's doing on YouTube, right? It's just, it's more produced than anyone else.
Exactly.
So that just, And then there's always a opposite reaction to that too, right? Is that the same with streaming, where there's like a desire for more lo-fi content?
I think that streaming is about the interaction that you have with the individual content creator. So like the lo-fi stuff always will consistently work really well. Like super well produced, high production value live streaming content that loses sight of that interactive nature of the content itself never does well on Twitch. That's why like G4 and many others like have come and went. Whereas like you also then have high produced content in that sort that is very successful, like Critical Role, right? So it just depends. But in any case, like no matter what you do, you have to still maintain that interactive component.
Yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your perspective.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
It was fun to chat and to open our minds a bit, and just hear how you do things, just as a streamer as well as in the category that you're in. It's fascinating.
Hell yeah.
Cool, man.
All right.